Many people who grew up in Ipswich in the days before computers considered spook hunting a great weekend pastime. And one of the places they haunted was the old Ipswich General Cemetery. It is a fascinating, morbid museum of Ipswich's past. Ipswich Cemetery has been open for more than 170 years, spanning 2 centuries. Ghost stories go way back to its very beginning and feature some of the city's prominent citizens, but also crimes, deaths and tragedies that have haunted the town. Visitors to the graveyard at night say the place can sometimes feel rather eerie. Others reckon it's just peaceful and tranquil. The longer you linger here, the more it seems that you're not alone.
The original cemetery occupied the northeastern corner, stretching west from the corner of Cemetery and Briggs Roads. From the early 1840s, the cemetery began to receive the town's dead. By 1849, there were problems. The soil was not deep enough to bury coffins. The smell of decomposing corpses drifted to the surface. The graveyard had to be resurveyed. Drivers passing by, in the late afternoon and at night, claimed to have seen ghostly figures, children and adults, dressed in the clothing of earlier days, walking among the tombstones, looking for their own. Today, it is the resting place of over 32,000 of Ipswich's former residents. Other hauntings here take many interesting forms. Black shapes, silhouettes of people moving, have been observed darting across the tracks, and footsteps can be heard walking on the gravel. People say that gravestones suddenly light up and then continue to glow as car headlights fade. On cold, still nights, mist can be seen hanging low to the ground in the oldest section, crawling through the cemetery, moving among the graves, following the paths, and anybody in the grounds at night. Buried in a pauper's grave is James Ryan. In old age, he claimed to be Dan Kelly, brother of Ned Kelly, the infamous Australian bushranger. Ryan claimed he escaped death and survived the siege at Glenrowan before fleeing to Queensland, where he adopted a different name. Many locals claim to have memories of meeting the old man and seeing the terrible scars from severe burns to Ryan's upper legs and back. His story has never been disproved.
Of the many haunted graves, the most enduring tale is of the Piper Memorial. Stories of the boy and the mystery surrounding how the young lad died have entertained generations of Ipswichites.
Located in the Church of England section is a remarkable grave containing the mortal remains of 2 children of Stella and Samuel Piper. The couple, aged in their 20s, married in 1889, but sadly the following year they lost their firstborn child. On the 28th of October 1890, Samuel Claude Piper, named after his father, died, aged only 4.5 months. Their sorrow was diminished when a little over a year later, the Pipers brought another child into the world, Terence Hildebert Piper. He became simply known as Bertie. The years went by and their son grew up, but then fate struck a cruel blow. Bertie died at his home in Burnett Street, less than a month after his 12th birthday. The next day, he was buried with his brother in Ipswich Cemetery. Ipswich undertaker J.W. Reid handled the funeral arrangements. Late in 1904, a magnificent memorial to the memory of the Piper boys was built by Brisbane-based Batstone's monumental masons. Over several months, combining sandstone, marble, ironwork and even photography, they created one of Australia's finest examples of cemetery art. The most astounding feature was a life-size statue of their son, which stood atop a pedestal. The Pipers' strong Christian beliefs were reflected in that the statue was positioned to face east, waiting for the day of resurrection, when Jesus would return with the rising sun to raise the dead. They put their boy up high so that he would be seen first by Jesus. Recreated from a photograph, it was extremely lifelike, down to the clothes he was wearing, including details such as cut-off shorts and a handkerchief in a pocket, to fine details like eyebrows and hair carved in stone. His right hand rested on a broken pillar, symbolism of a life cut short. The left was clutched in anticipation. A tractor, Bertie's favourite toy, was chained to an iron ring at the base of the pedestal. Samuel Piper ran his own boot store, part of the Crib and Foot department store. Funds for the memorial came from generous donations from his fellow staff members, as well as friends of the grieving couple. On each side of the pedestal were inscriptions in lead lettering. Details of the children's deaths were recorded in matching font and size on the eastern and southern faces. Both fell asleep rather than having died.
The deep grief of the Pipers is evidenced in a beautiful poem written by Sam on the eastern side of the memorial.
Such sweet affection ne'er of earth could be, of noble mind yet gentle as a dove. Bright rays from heaven to earth did shine through thee, to tell us love is God and God is love. Ah, then our tears will all be put to shame, when thou to us our Bertie wilt restore. In heavenly care we'll know him as the same, yet lovelier than e'er he was before.
Carved in sandstone below the marble plaque is the line, "Inconsolably regretted." The Pipers' Christian beliefs and their struggle with their loss is clear from the passages they chose from the Bible. The statue of the Boy Who Moves is the most well-known haunted grave in Ipswich General Cemetery. The earliest tales date to the 1920s. Visitors to the cemetery during daylight hours, coming to visit their loved ones, would stop to admire the elaborate memorial. It was particularly popular with children. As a reward for being patient, kids were taken to see the boy. As their parents read the inscriptions, the children would marvel at the little boy who seemed to be as real as themselves. By the mid-20th century, the boy was attracting teenagers and young adults exploring their city at night. Full moons, Halloween and Friday the 13th were particularly popular nights for them to come and visit him. His eyes were said to glow a brilliant emerald green if you waited and watched long enough. People would stay all night to see if his eyes moved. As dawn approached and tiredness set in, many claimed he would suddenly look at you. No matter where you stood in front of the statue, his eyes were said to follow. Some recall the whole statue glowed green. Bertie was also said to turn his head and look down at people. A popular trick was to stand and turn your back, keeping the statue behind you, but in the corner of your eye, and then it was said to move. Some stories say his right hand lifts from the column. Others say his statue follows people and walks through the cemetery at night.
The circumstances of Bertie's death have long been a mystery. An inscription on the western side of the memorial has fueled more than 120 years of speculation. "Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord."
The words led to people wondering whether the boy was the victim of a crime or even murder. The memorial was badly damaged by vandals in 2001. Scores of gravestones and memorials were destroyed.
There's been numerous occasions of vandalism in the cemetery which are of great distress to me because looking after the place, there's times we've come in here and myself and the sexton have stood up around 100 graves that have been vandalised, stood the headstones back up and tried to preserve the place. It's a huge impact. I mean, all these headstones and monuments, they're irreplaceable. They would pick up something off a grave and use that to totally destroy the headstones. Just unbelievable. Back then, a lot of it was reliant on headstone to find the grave. And without that headstone, you didn't find them. Family couldn't find them. I get very emotional about the cemetery and very disgusted by any of the damage. I mean, that was my job to look after it. The Bertie Piper one, it's a beautiful statue. To find that vandalised back in 2006, that was very, very disappointing. Bowled down, his head was broken off. I think they'd even used his head to try and break other things on the grave, you know. So, yeah, it was really bloody heartbreaking. When you see things like that, especially such a popular headstone, everybody loved it. Everybody that came here, the first thing they would look at would be that Piper statue because he's unique. There's no other monuments like that in any of the other cemeteries. Bertie's he's a one-off. He really is in the Ipswich area, amongst all our cemeteries, absolutely.
"4 years after the memorial was damaged by vandals, a group of 3 women entered the graveyard at midnight. One was celebrating her 40th birthday. The last time they had been here was for her 18th birthday. They were thrilled to find the statue just as they remembered it, but although they stayed all night, to their disappointment, it never moved. The thing is, though, they could not have seen the statue. The woman was adamant about the date that they were there. 'You don't forget your 40th, she said to me. When it was explained to her that she could not have watched the statue, as it had been smashed to pieces 4 years earlier in 2001, she was speechless. After the vandalism, the broken pieces of the boy were given to his great-nephew Vince. When Vince passed away, his relatives did not know what to do with them. Bertie must have wanted to be restored. I approached Alan Hawkes, manager of Ipswich Cemetery, to try and fix the memorial. Alan thought that he'd lost the contact details of the family, but then in a strange twist of fate, these turned up just in time.
It was, I think it was inside a coat pocket, nowhere where I expected to look, but I just happened to get it out and blow me down if it wasn't there. And as I say, I'm a bit of a hoarder. I collect all those things. I've got every diary from all my time in council, every notebook, and that was the one that wasn't with the rest, and it was only just a sheer fluke that we found it when we did, and we were able to contact the family and get it back. Otherwise, it would have been lost.
In 2010, the memorial was restored by Bat Stones, 106 years after they originally built it.
I operate a stonemasonry business in Brisbane. I'm the 4th generation. It's something that it's in your blood and you just can't, you've got to keep on doing it. First it was hard to understand why it ever happened, but I guess it's been going on for years and years and years, and it's going to be hard to ever stop that happening. It certainly stands out, and yes, it is exceptional. You can see where it's been built with love. Very rare that you would see a bust like that. There are certain circumstances where people have had them done in bronze and then put them in the cemetery, but as far as we're concerned, very, very rare for us to do one out of stone. I knew that my grandfather was involved in the construction of it, and that was a proud moment to think that, and that we had the opportunity to restore it after the vandalism.
The statue of the boy was reinstated on the plinth. The work was commissioned and paid for by my company, Ghost Tours Proprietary Limited, and Ipswich City Council to commemorate the city's 150th anniversary. Bertie once again awaits the rising sun.
So what killed Bertie? For 4 weeks, the young boy suffered from terrible fever. His parents called a doctor, but in 1904, there was little he could do. The next day, he lapsed into unconsciousness and he never awoke.
Enteric fever, also known as typhoid fever, is recorded on Bertie's death certificate as the reason for his demise. Today we know it as food poisoning caused by the Salmonella bacteria. It is still deadly. The lad most likely became ill from drinking contaminated water or eating spoiled food. His parents could only watch as he died a slow, horrible death. The words, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay," is a quote from the Holy Bible, St. Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 12, verse 19. Scripture says that revenge or anger is an act only for God, who alone can set things right. I will repay means God will one day make up for the loss and the hurt. Death is God's will, and Christians must try not to be bitter. The Pipers did get to see their sons again. Sam died 10 years after Bertie and was buried in a grave near to his sons. Their mother Stella went to live with family in Brisbane. She died in 1951, aged 88. The Piper Memorial remains standing in Ipswich Cemetery.